Okay. Um, Hello. I'm teaching uh Erection's intro to Unreal Engine 5. Whoa. Alright, so what is Unreal and what the fuck is this for even? Uh Unreal is a game engine and Unreal is a game engine. Oh my god, that's annoying. Uh But it can also do a whole bunch of other things. So I've got here, predominantly, it's used to make some fucking video games. It's a cool place to render like any 3D environments or characters that you've made, like just on an art perspective. Some people make films and cartoons in it. That's like pretty popular lately. You can do ArcViz stuff in it, which I did for a while. It can crash to the desktop pretty well. And more. Wow. Um, so here's a summary of what I'm gonna go over uh, in this little thing. We're gonna go over making a new project from scratch. What the fuck is all this shit on my screen? So like a overview of just like some of the UI, not all of it because there's heaps, but just the stuff you'd need to know mostly. We're gonna make some stuff, so placing stuff in like the viewport and how to move around and shit. Um, we'll have a look at like, or once we've done all that, making materials so we don't just sit around with like default colors and can make your own colors and shit. We're gonna look into lighting. Um, Unreal has heaps of lighting stuff, so we'll have a skim over some of the things you do there. Uh, Gonna answer this question that I'll probably get asked. So adding like game templates, we're gonna be using like the third person one probably. And we're gonna have a look into blueprints, which is like the node-based coding that comes with Unreal Engine. And we're gonna make a few like moving platforms and opening doors, and adding like an objective to a little game that we can make. I've got a little demo here of what we're probably going to make. Some of the mechanics. So we've got this character when you hit play that can walk around. This is just default Unreal, and I've got a few little collectible items here. These orange things with some moving platforms. And I've got a little thing here. I've deleted a bunch of say too long, but if you collect all the little orange things, oh no, I missed that one. There we go. And I can come over here. The last thing we have is a door that can open and close when you get close to it, like that. And if you collect all the little items, it says you won, hooray! And you can press R to try again. You can do that. Just reloads the level, all the collectibles right there. So it's a pretty simple thing, but I thought it would be a good way to just learn a few things, and obviously if you start from here, you can branch out. After we do the all that, there'll be a few like questions, I guess, if anyone wants to ask stuff. There's not really anyone in this call right now, but if anyone comes in later, feel free to ask things. Cool. All right, so let's just sort of get into it. I'm gonna go straight from the start. Anyone who's watching that already has like knowledge in 3D or Unreal anything, this might be a bit of a nothing that you wouldn't already know for this first section, but I still think it's worth talking about, and there might be one or two things you could like pick up here. So starting right off the bat is we're going to start a new project. So opening the Epic Games Launcher, find the version of Unreal Engine 5 in the Epic Games Launcher, and click launch, which is this little yellow button. Mine says 5.02 because they just did an update, but any version of 5 is fine. If it's the full release one, it's all going to be the same stuff mostly. You'll get a visit from this screen, which is just like a little loading splash screen. Shouldn't take too long. But once you do that, you get to this screen, which is the project browser. In here, we can open old projects as well as find these pre-templates for creating new projects, as well as just being able to just create a blank one. So yeah, this is sort of like as you make a game or cartoon or fucking whatever. There's some really good free things to look at. From here, we're going to click on the games icon because today I'm going to go making game stuff. So click the gamey icon and also make sure we have the blank selected as the project template. The settings here that you'll probably see, which is like on the right of the launcher, I've just kept it at maximum quality. I didn't turn on ray tracing or anything. Like, it's just going to take too long to build the project and stuff. So yeah, once you do that, just make sure you give it a good name. Like, that's not really anything to think about, so just pick a location and give a name. But a little tip, computers are fucking gross, and they'll destroy your files sometimes when they feel like it. So it's safer to make sure your project doesn't include any spaces or special characters in the name. I use camel casing, which is where you capitalize every new word in your project. And it's just safer to not use spaces, or underscores are usually fine, but even that, like, just pure words generally be the least likely to corrupt somehow. Cool. And then you also get to this screen again, where it'll load your project. Anyways, doing that might take a second. Just noticed that Logan and Corey have just joined. I haven't really gone into this. If you guys are keen to follow along or anything, I'm just talking over how to create a project itself right from the get-go, so nothing too fancy. Can quickly catch you up on that. I'm sure I mentioned the little chat thing on the right there can help you if you wanna. But anyway, this screen might take a hot second to get through, and then you'll be in Unreal. But what is all this shit on the screen? Well, I'll talk over, like I said, with the UI, some of the main aspects of Unreal, but I'm not going to get too much into all the specific things because honestly, there's so much shit. I don't even know what everything does, and I've been using this for 5 years, well, 4, and then 5 of the versions. But yeah, so yeah, I'm just going to keep it simple with the basics. So, firstly, we have the viewport, and this is probably where you'll be hanging out most of the time. A lot of the visual stuff comes together in space. This is like the canvas of your painting. Yeah, it's if you've ever seen any like other 3D software, you'd probably be very familiar with that. Over here on the top right, by default, we have the outliner and the levels editor. Specifically, the outliner, it's almost just like a description of, like, in list form of like everything that currently exists within this scene, like in your viewport, or your level rather. As well as if you have multiple levels nested under each other, which is a more specific thing, but it's not too much worry. But in the outliner, you'll find, if I had like a cube in this scene, you'll see cube written here, or cube 01, or yeah, so on. Very handy if you can't be bothered siphoning, like looking around. If you lost something, you can see it there. Next, we have the details panel. If you have something selected in your like viewport, so say I had a cube sitting here and I click that, I can see all like the information regarding to that, and I'll get more into that after this. It's where you can see things like, yeah, numerical transformations, as well as settings regarding physics, collisions, lighting, and rendering. So pretty handy for just like getting a look around at stuff. Up in the top left, we have options to change which mode we're in, and components. to add to our scene, like basic shapes and lights. We also have option to play our level based off the rules we set, and then more advanced options and settings as well live up in this sort of top left area. Um, Again, once we get into it, I'll go over that stuff a bit more. And the last important thing is on the bottom left of Unreal, you'll notice a little button called the Contents Drawer. Clicking this opens a huge menu box over the screen. This guy, so it should pop up. It's a very important menu. You come back to it pretty often. I guess one way to think about it is like it's an artist palette where we keep all the important files. So any art or code or music that's going to be in our project lives in here. It's just the folder structure. I was about to say mess, but it shouldn't be a mess. It should really be keeping try and like tidy it up. But we can click and drag things from here into our viewport or into our level, and that's how we just add like our own custom things rather than just the default sort of shapes. And here's a little tip: we press the fuck out of this button. This is a good time to learn the first hotkey in Unreal, which is Control and Spacebar. Pressing Control Space pops up this little dude. It's very handy. So if I was in here and I Control Space, it just pops up and I can see all like the bits associated with my project at the moment. Cool. So let's make some stuff, just real basic. So on the top left of Unreal, let's click this little cube with a green plus, and then come down to shapes. And here's the tricky part. Click and drag the word cube, or really any shape you want here. Click and drag that from this list into your scene. And you'll get, something like this. It'll snap down to the floor probably. It's most likely you're in like the default Unreal sort of screen here. And you can click and like drag it in and you can look at it now. So look at our little cube, all snug in our world, and you can see it from one angle. So here's how we can go about moving around the viewport. And there's a few ways to do this, and I'll go over each one. I'll list them here and then I'll show them as well to make a point. So the first one, which is my favorite method of moving around, is you hold right click and you sort of fly around your scene with WASD as well as Q and E to go up and down. That's definitely my most preferred one. I can show that off right now. Like if I hold right click, I can look around, and then if I use WASD, I can fly around and then use Q and E to get up and down. This is definitely like my most preferred, and I think I've seen a lot of other people who are pretty efficient with the program also do this way. Very similar controls to if you ever used Minecraft and did creative mode. So I guess you can make that mental thing. Another way is if we hold left Alt button and use left click and right click and middle mouse button to rotate, pan, and zoom around the screen. This one, if you come from a sort of Maya 3D background, if I hold left Alt, and I can like start to pan and stuff around. This can be useful sometimes if you're doing specific things. A combination of all these movements is pretty handy, but again, I still prefer the flying around. And then the last one is you just use the mouse buttons by themselves to move around, but that's probably my least favorite and also very janky to. So if I can just using the mouse, you can hold right click to look around, which isn't too bad, but then left click sort of drives you forward while looking around. It's a bit shaky, and you can scroll the mouse wheel or hold middle mouse click to pan. I don't know. People that use this are evil, so yeah, keep that in mind. I definitely just recommend the holding the right click button, right mouse button click, and then using WSD as well as Q and E to fly around. It's probably the most optimal way. Also, in any mode, pressing F will focus the camera on whatever you have selected in your scene. So if I'm, flying around here and I'm just trying to look at this cube on this wall over here, if I click that cube with left mouse button and then press F, it's like a frame up or focus. So now it just brings me to there. If I click that, I think this also works if I click something in the outliner, so I can see all these cubes that are in my scene over here. and I press F, it'll take me to where that is, which is very handy if you've got heaps of shit around your scene, or if I just want to look at that over there, I can just press the button. Cool, magic. So now you can look around our cube that we placed earlier, or whatever shape we placed earlier in the level. So what the fuck do we do now? How do we move it around? Will we ever find love? Most of these problems can be solved with what's called the transform gizmo. Whoa! So there's 3 types of movements traditionally used in 3D software, and in Unreal, it's the exact same. To manipulate objects, these are the move and translate tool. So lets you move objects around. You can tell what it looks like with these little arrows. We have the rotate tool, which lets you rotate objects around its pivot, as well as the scale tool, which you can adjust the scale of an object on all or singular axes. And these can be found and selected at the top right of the viewport here. So if you look in Unreal, at the very top right of your little viewport, you can see these little, the first sort of cluster of buttons. The mouse over it says select objects, but then we also have translate, rotate, and scale. This is pretty handy, so if I drag a cube in, which is here, you can tell if you have it selected, depending on what it looks like. But yeah, translate lets you just grab a arrowy, or you can grab these squares in between to move on multi-axis, or you can grab the exact center, this little circle, to camera-based movement on all axes. We have the rotate, which more or less works the same, but it rotates. And we have the scale, which if you grab it by the middle, scales it uniformly, or we pick one axis, we can make shit grow or get smaller, stuff like that. We can also do the multi-axis thing here. These are my little GIFs explaining the 3 movements. We have translate, rotate, and scale. Here's the tip. Considering how much you'll be transforming shapes, you're fucking dweeb if you use these buttons to swap which tool you're in. Instead, we should learn to use the hotkeys W, E, and R to swap between move, rotate, and scale respectively. So rather than pressing these buttons up here, if you press W, gives you the move tool, E will give you the rotate tool, and R will give you the scale. It's much faster. If you mouse over the top, it'll even have in brackets afterwards W, E, and R. So if you ever forget the hotkeys for that. With most things, actually, if there's an option for a hotkey, it'll tell you. Also, if you want to not be any translate mode, Q or pressing this first mouse one will just unselect and not show you those options, but still allow you to select things. Cool, so that's just simple movements in Unreal. What did I have next? So I guess at this point, would be worth trying to grab more shapes and bring them into the scene using scale, transform and rotate, and just play around by dragging shapes in your screen. Sorry. If anyone has any questions, by the way, at this point so far, in the actual voice chat, if you like mouse over the voice channel, there's like a little open chat thing. Say this one. Feel free to buzz me there, and I can unmute you if you want to ask something. But yeah, I kind of have it muted because I'm recording as well. So that's just like a brief overview of how to move around. So at this point, you should be pretty familiar with just being able to make shapes up here, pressing some green plusy shapes, drag something in, you can move it around, navigating around as well. I will also mention that going through what's I gonna say? Sorry, I just brain farted. I was gonna say, I'll put this document somewhere in this like chat for people to download after if they want to look through this too. Cool. I don't have too much on this. So my next step, I guess, is the cool braid game box. Bro needs more materials. So now we've got the hang of adding cubes and shit in the level. I guess we can do something about all that natural gray. I know it's white. It used to be gray. Trust me. So we're going to fix that by making some materials. So this is where it gets a little more techie-ish rather than just the simple cubes and stuff. So in our content browser, which we can open with control space, right click in an empty space or click the add on the top left of the content browser and click the word material. It's going to add a new material to our content browser, so I'll just do that now with you guys. I'll also just set myself in a new level that'll probably look the exact same as what you got over there. Cool. So I'm going to go right click with this open, control space, right click, material. I can give this a name. I'll call this M for material underscore base color. I'll just go over this real quick. And then we double click this to open up. Sorry, it's fine. And then we open this up. It'll open a little new window probably. The first thing we can do here is it's a pain to work with all these windows. Unreal has like a tabbing system, so you can see at the top left of this new window that popped up, there's a little tab here. It's pretty convenient, especially for this moment, just to drag it up here, and then we can flick between our main world level, as well as going between any like things we have open, which honestly this can get kind of big sometimes. Sometimes it's worth having it on another monitor anyway. You can always drag it back out to have another window and put it wherever you want. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. And I think this is where I got up to. I got too lazy to keep making the PowerPoint. So everything I do now is just going to be in Unreal itself. From here, this is a node-based sort of editor to create materials. It uses the same sort of node-based all across Unreal in different aspects, but this one's specifically for creating materials. It's just a giant gridded thing, and we have like a bunch of little words written here in the middle. We can use right-click to pan around this scene, as well as scroll wheel to go in and out. So this is, yeah, the base of where we're going to start. So if we right-click anywhere in here, we get a full list of all the things we can add to our scene. They're all in like little, what's it called? Folders. And there's so many different things that do different stuff. I have no idea what all these do. There's too many. Anyone who knows what all these done is a fucking nerd. But there's a few really important ones just for starting, which could be really helpful. And the first one is, we can see our material on the left here. We can use the, if we just click and drag that around, we can get a preview of what our thing looks like. Right now it's just all defaulty because we haven't plugged anything in. So if we right click and write constant 3 vector, which is, I'll get into what these vectors and constants mean, but if we make a constant 3 vector, the other way to get this, which is really handy considering this is one that you can make a lot, if you just hold 3 on the keyboard and click, you get one of these as well. But now if we click this, or we double click it, but if we click it once, on the left here we have a details of what we currently have selected. So it's like this, you can see all these nerds on the left here, but if we click this guy, we can see, oh, what do we want? And it's the name, but also it has like a box here, it's like a little black box, right? If we click that, it's like a color wheel. So I'm just gonna make this red or something real quick. And we're like, okay, cool, I have my red color here. But this isn't red, so what I do. So there's this little pin on the right of each node that you drag out. And this is, whoops, I made it far down. this is my little spaghetti that I have to hook up to where I want it. It's like a switch panel, like a switchboard to make things work. So if I want my red color to come through, I'm going to plug that into the first one in this node called base color. So I click that over. My thing is red. Cool. Getting into a bit more on what these constants are, there's 4 types by default. Well, 4 types that you'll probably ever really use. So constant 0 or constant 1, which is just a singular number. When it says constant, just means more or less just a number. So you can just plug a value in here. 0, I could write, 41, 1.5. It doesn't matter. And you can see that changing there. If I hold 2, it's a constant 2, which is 2 numbers, not additional, but side by side. So I have 2 numbers I can change here. So right, I make this like 23 and 51. It's 23, 51. And this is useful for some things, for coordinates. A lot of what this uses is vector maths, or which sort of just gets converted to RGB anyway. And then we have a vector 3, which is 3 values side by side, which when we try to edit that, rather than giving us numbers, it actually gives us a color wheel, because 3 numbers side by side makes an RGB value, or HSV. We're using RGB, so we can like click and bring some colors in here, whatever. But you can see there's numbers here. These RGB values are actually the same as these numbers by themselves, but 3 of them together. So this is more or less me writing 0.5, 52, and 6, which gives me a really bright sort of green. But it's also fine to just click around here and slide. So now I have, well, that was white, yeah, good example color. Cool, that's green. And the last one is a vector 4, which is just 4 of these numbers side by side, which will also give you a color, but an additional bar for transparency, which is useful if you want to make, see-through things. I got these really quickly by just holding 1 and clicking, 2 and clicking, holding 3, clicking, and 4, just on the keyboard and then left mouse. It's the fastest way to get these. It's a real pain to just write constant and then look for that one, 2 vector, 3 vector, 4 vector. So that's a really good one to get the hang of. Going down the list, we have metallic as well. So this controls the metalness of the materials. So this is a value traditionally controlled with a 0 to 1 sort of like representational value. You can use a texture or multiple colors to say like a part of this is black, part of this is white. But I'm going to hold 1 and left click, just gives us a single constant. Right now it's set to 0, so if I plug this into metallic, it's not going to change because the default value this was actually 0. But if I change this value now to like 1, it's gotten a lot more shinier, sort of car painty. So now this has a value of 1 for metallic. Generally this is a 0 to 1, or it's often, some people just rather do a 0 or 1 value to say something is metallic or not. I guess for basic it's just much easier to say that rather than to get too deep into it. So you can play with this. Let's say we keep that metallic. Underneath that we have specular. This one sort of, to put in easy to understand terms, is just how light sort of like, actually, this might be easier to actually put in and then you can sort of see. So value of 0 to a value of 1 on specular. I guess it doesn't need metallic. You can see it's how much light sort of diffuses in there. It's sort of like difficult to explain, but visually you can see that when its value set to 0, there's like no reflective sort of like look to it. This isn't the same as roughness, which is how shiny something is, which we'll get into in a sec. So by default this is 0.5. That might be worth just to skip that one for now. Underneath we have roughness, which again is a value that's either like on a grayscale, black or white, which converts to either a solid color, so 0 is black, 1 is white. That's probably should have mentioned that a bit later, but that's sort of a good way to get into it. So value of 0 in this makes it very shiny. You can see the environment in the background there getting reflected onto it. That's the value of 1. Completely makes it not reflect any environmental stuff, so it starts to look a bit more like chalk. And again, if you mix that with the specular of 0, you'll get a completely flat, unabsorbing, more or less, sphere. I'm going to plug this into metallic and put a value of 1, and that'll give me a really shiny metal ball. Sorry, this has to be a value of 0. So now we have something that almost kind of looks like car paint. Very fucking polished car paint, but it's there. For basics, I probably don't need to get too much into the other stuff right now. I could probably get in a bit later. But just plugging in to get new colors saved is using a vector 3 into the base color, as well as maybe controlling the metallic and the roughness and the specular if you want, but metallic and roughness with just a constant 1. By holding 1 and click again to do that, to control shininess of objects as well as the metallic. So let's say I'm happy with this red material. On the top left of this window, we have a little save button. There's also no apply, but I prefer to use save. Apply will just update it in the world, but it's honestly just worth saving. I don't ever really use the apply button. So you hit save, you come back, and let's say I go into this add and add my cube again. Back to the movement controls I've got earlier. So I've got my cubey. If I control spacebar, I can now see the preview of this material. There's my shiny red car paint. One way to apply these things, at least on a static mesh like this, is just click and drag that over. And now I have my shiny, kind of looks like jelly, cube. So that's a good way to make some materials. So I guess using this technique, you could create a whole bunch of different materials, and like possibly texture stuff. What was that? What the fuck was it? All right, hello, and we're back. The next step we're gonna look at. So we just had a look at materials, and I've got my little green blob here. I'm just gonna hit save on that again, and then close this little tab, just so I don't get too overwhelmed with all this UI stuff. It's still there. If I hit control spacebar, you can see it hanging out in here. And what we're going to go on from here now is we're going to have a look at lighting. Real brief overview. How to light up with some directional lights, as well as a skylight, and then looking at like point lights and stuff like that. And then maybe I can get into some more advanced lighting features, or maybe I'll say that for later. We'll see how we go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is, even if you're not in this default desert landscape, this might be a bit different, but just assuming you are in this default desert landscape or wherever you are, have a look through your outliner. You can look for it in the world, but honestly, it must be easier here. So you might accidentally have the levels tab open, so make sure you have the outliner open on the top right here. And then come over to where you see directional light. By default, they've actually put it under a folder called lighting, but it might just be lying around anyway. You can also write light up here, and you'll get directional light and the skylight. But what we want to actually do is I'm going to delete the directional light, and I'm also going to delete the skylight. I'll leave the other components in here. And you can sort of see the level freaking out trying to get rid of that. It's interesting. Cool. because we're going to be adding those ourselves, and yeah, I'm going to briefly talk over them. So let's start with a directional light. If you come up to this little green plus cube on the top lefty, and you come down to lights, which is just above shapes where we were before. So we're going to look at lights. We can see a whole variety of little lights up here. There's directional, point light, spotlight, a rectangular light, and a skylight. We're just going to start with a directional light. So if we click and drag directional light out into our world, doesn't really matter where you place a directional light because they work world space. They'll always just be like light coming in from, and if you look at the icon in the world, you can see an arrow pointing. That means this, or we can even see the sun there, is pointing down onto this. And that would become more evident if we also had a cube in here, because now you can see the shadow of that cube. I'm just going to leave that cube there as well for some reference points. So if we click this directional light in the world and we start rotating around, we can actually change the shadow. It's even changing the time of day in this environment here. It normally doesn't do that. It's just because this has been set up with a sky atmosphere as well as a sky sphere, which is like reading the directional light for visual input. So that's just happening here, which is quite nice, but that's not something that by default would always happen. If you had like just a blank project and added this in, all it does more or less is just put a big fucking bright light coming in from one direction and will hit all your objects seen and create a shadow. So you can move this around where you want. The rotation is what matters more over the movement. So if I start rotating this in different angles, you can see even the mountains back there, they're casting different shadows. And there's a few little settings you can play with the light. So if we have a light selected, and this is with any light and with anything really in Unreal, but if we go look at the details panel with the light selected, right at the sort of top-ish here, just under the transforms, which is what we're actually changing here. If we change this, we can see those values change. But we have a few other little settings down here. Some nice ones to play with straight off the bat is the indirect. Oh no, sorry, not that one. Wait, is that? Did they change the? Where's like the actual bloody intensity of these? Did they change how directional lights works since I've last touched them? We'll start. Oh, sorry, intensity. I just missed it. We have intensity, which is currently being recorded in lux. It's set to 10. And we can click and drag that slider or write our own value in. If we make it 150, our scene's going to be very bright. And if we made it lower, the directional light will actually do nothing by default. That cube is just like a bit laggy and it's updating, but we can make it really subtle and have a really dim light. So that's a value you can play with to just control lighting in your scenes. I'm just going to leave that like 5 for now. And right underneath that we have the light color. It's set to white by default, which, yeah, light is white. But if you want a more stylistic approach, you can come in here and start changing the color of that directional light. So we could make it like, obviously maybe bright green. We're going to get big green lighting just cast across our whole world. It's like it's poisoned. Changing the color of these directional lights artistically is usually something you want to be more subtle about. So just off-white usually, adjusting the saturation slider. If you look at this little wheel thing, the dead center is white. So just sort of etching away into a color, like etching away into red for a more warmer look or blue for a more colder feel to it. It's generally the way I sort of go with these. But you can just honestly do whatever you want with these colors. There's a few other settings here which aren't too necessary to go over right now. Obviously, you're welcome to play with all these settings like cast shadows, the tick box, and it does exactly what you think it would do. Effects, well, this sort of just like, does this even work or not? So turning that off just makes the light off. It's more or less the same as deleting it, but I guess if you wanted to in that moment, hide it. And then there's a whole bunch of like advanced settings to play with, which are worth just honestly playing with it. If you make a mistake, you can always just like, or like you've gone too deep, fucked up one, just always just make a new directional light. Adding multiple directional lights does actually keep adding like light, so they do override each other. Like in a multiplier way, so you can see if I drag this one here, you can see two shadows coming out of the original light I had, and then this secondary one. Maybe if you had a planet with two suns or something, that could be useful. So that's direction light. That's like a good way to get some lighting in your scene. But there are a few extra things you can do. One thing that's noticeable is the shadow is like pitch black because it is the only light. Even like the bounce lighting hitting like the back of this cube, which is from Unreal's Lumen, Global Illumination. But we want to find a way to maybe lighten these shadows. There's another really useful light. If we come into lights again up here, which is a skylight, and there's even a description. Captures the distance parts of your level and applies that scene as a light. So if we drag this out into our level, we can see, it was first thing, our shadow here just got lit up, so it's no longer a pitch black shadow. We can still sort of see underneath it. The skylight is more of just like, and if I deleted the directional light just to only show this, it's sort of like a flooding, oh geez, now it's all like upset at me. Okay, it doesn't like the sky speaking about itself. Or did it break? I think maybe deleting these back and forwards is making it upset at me. So if we include our sky, we can just see it. It sort of adds like an ambient light across the whole level, which is very handy, predominantly for lighting up these dark shadows and just sort of adding like a fill light to everything, so it's not completely pitch black in spots or stuff like that. There's a few other things too, but that's probably the most straightforward one to talk about right now. We have a few settings here. This one doesn't matter where you place this in the world. It's just a universal sort of light. We have an intensity, which pumping that up, anything past like 2 in my opinion is blinding, and the slider does not let you go really slow with it. So this one I think is much more convenient to just type in. So setting it to 0 is as if we never had it, but start coming up like 0.5 or 1, again maybe 2 or 3. We'll just like push that back to how we had it. So let's leave that at like maybe 2 or something, and I think that looks fine. We also have a light color, so we can pick the color of this, which is different to the directional light. It's actually sometimes handy for debugging, to figure out what is actually being lit up from this light. But we can, like say like we wanted a more colder appearance to our scene, come into this more bluish look, which should add more colder shadows, and a real chilly vibe testing. We have a few other little settings here too, but again, there's stuff that maybe you should more or less play with yourself, because this is just going forever. Again, the effects world one is just like almost like if you want it on or off or not. If you're clicking stuff and not actually seeing it like happen straight away, like if I click the skylight and hit effects world, and I can still see it like bluish and stuff here. This new like Unreal 5 Lumen stuff takes a second. You actually see it like trying to fix itself up, but it's trying to remember what you had on the screen before. Sometimes just looking around, like doing a little 360 spin, and you can see it goes back to how it was. So if you are making updates that aren't updating, just sort of like shaking the screen, looking away and back again. Maybe it doesn't like getting changed in front of you. I don't know. But yeah, there we have 2 of the sort of like scene lighting lights. the directional light and the skylight. A few other little lights up here aren't quite as scene filling. For example, we have a point light where if I drag this out, um, adds a singular point in the world where light is being emitted from. So you can see the center there, and you can see this sort of ring around it, which is sort of like its attenuation radius or how much influence it has in the world. We have settings for intensity here, so if I pump this up, let's make it like 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever I just said. So you can see as I move that around, it's like just affecting that area, and you can see the radius of the sphere there affecting that, and we can move them around and whatnot. You can see it's casting shadows too by default. We also have just again base colors there. We can play with. Let's make that like 400. The intensity as well as which color we want this light. So it could be like a red, like safety alarm light or something. Obviously, if you had a model of like a safety light, it makes it more believable than just a red floating ominous light, but could be fun for lighting. We have similar controls with a spotlight, which acts just like a real world spotlight on like a theater set. So it's a point in the space where the light is coming from this point, but we can see rather than this big sphere, it's like a cone coming out. I pump up the intensity on this one, make that more visually obvious. We can see again the radius there is being affected, and if we rotate that one, we can get some more like spotlighty looks. And we're able to change the color in that one as well. It's probably also worth mentioning for these two, the point light and the spotlight, they have options at the top here. Like this one has an inner cone angle for changing outer cone angle for changing how wide the spread is, as well as one of these does the bloody distance. Oops, the inner cone angle stops the fall off, so you can see it gets really sharp then. Which one's the... Am I blind? Oh, sorry, the attenuation rate is right under light color, which is how much that light will affect the world and the distance of its origin. So you can see that like little cone increasing and decreasing. So if we made that really high up, we get like a really vividly bright point light. Cool, and it's the exact same on this. Sorry, that was a spotlight. On this point light too, we have a attenuation radius, so we can make that bigger and smaller, as well as like the source radius itself, which it's like how big the light would be. And yeah, we have all these settings, and again, like there's so much stuff it's worth playing with just to see what it does, even in advanced settings. Like shadow bias and stuff, which probably won't matter now if we have a giant light here casting every shadow. But there's a lot to play with in terms of these lighting stuff. There's also rectangular lights, which cast light as if it's from like a board. This can be useful if you had like a billboard or something, or like a big square light on a wall or something that you wanted a more and you can change the shape of this up here somewhere. Yeah, you can change the width and all that height. So now it sort of looks like those bar lights you would see down like a creepy hallway. And this one actually almost works identical to a point light, but rather than point, it's coming from like an area. Cool. So that's sort of the gist of lighting stuff. It's playing with a directional light, the skylight, as well as these smaller lights to create more interest in areas. At least real briefly. There's more advanced visual effects stuff you can do, like adding like fog and stuff, but I can get into that maybe near the end. I'm just trying to keep it pretty simple. Cool, so that's lighting. I'll do another little break in a sec, but I just thought I might dip into the next one, uh, which is, but what do I do if I want to run around? So you saw me before with my little demo map. You could have a little character that would run around the scene. So let's quickly like try and get something that happening. Um, so the quickest way to do that is if we had like back from, and I'll pop this on my screen again. In the project browser where we first made our project, if you click games, you can see all these default sort of like presets. If you were to click into there, and one of them would be like third person or spaceship shooter or car or something. But if you want to add those after the fact, so we've already made our project, like, oh shit, I didn't add them. But if you hit Control Spacebar and come into your content browser, and you have to click the add on the top left here, but if you click add, at the very top, the second thing in the list, we see add feature or content pack. So if we click that, we can see all these default sort of settings here. We can click content, see it has a bunch of material stuff, or some C++ code. We're just going to stick with blueprint, and we can see a bunch of stuff here like vehicle, virtual reality, handheld, AR, top down, third person, first person. I'm going to stick with third person because that's what I'm going to be using for the next thing where we make like a little project. So I'm going to click third person and go add to project. Cool. And now if it's popped up the content browser, I'm just going to close that and cancel this because I want to be able to open it here. But if I go into content now, I should be able to see a folder that I made in content called third person. Probably actually made a few others, one called level prototyping, one called characters. But sticking with just third person, if we open this guy up and open blueprints, we can see it's added a blueprint or like a controller for one of the characters we want. You can click and drag that in, or it's not going to do anything by default. So what we want to do, now that we've added this third person like preset to our scene, we want to make that like, so if I play this game, I want to be running around. By default, I sort of talked about this in the Q earlier, on the top left of Unreal, where we have been adding like our lights and shapes, there's a little green play button. It says play the level in the active level editor viewport, or you can press Alt P to do that. So I'm just going to hit that little play button, and all the little gizmos went away. By default, all I can do is use WC to fly around because I haven't set any controllers. There's no like game logic telling me what the fuck to do. It's just playing everything. I can see the clouds moving and can fly around my scene. That's all I can do right now. But we just added our third person thing. So how do we make it play that instead? Well, with the level open, where we have our details panel, there's probably another little tab here called world settings. If that's not there, and I'll delete that for just the example's sake, if you don't have a world settings like the detail, if you come on the top left of Unreal and go window, there's all these little windows that some have tick box next to it. You can see right near the top here under level editor, there's world settings. You click that, it should add the little tab, or if it's like flowed somewhere else, you just grab it. And I like to dock it next to details because it's very rare you need both of these open. So in world settings, right near the top, it's actually the second little list we see. It says pre-computed visibility. Right under that we have game mode, and it says game mode override. And then next to it says none with a little drop down. So we click that. There's a lot of little random bullshit codes in here that it just has to default with, but we should be able to see BP underscore third person game mode, which is the one that got added when we added that content pack. I have two here because I already added one, so now I got two, which is awesome. So I'm going to click that, and that's it. The game mode override is now saying use this third person game mode code. So if I hit play now, I am now controlling this little dude. I'll just check. They have a name now. I think her name is Harley, and the male model is Harley, and this one is Quinn. Oh no, Manny. The male one is Manny, and this is Quinn, because they called it mannequin. Anyway, that is so unimportant to know that, but now you know. And you can run around your little light world that I've made here. So cool. That's how you can add like a content pack. All right, hello again. Uh, so we just went over lighting and how to add in a default sort of template character. So I've got this chick running around now. I built a little sort of area where I have this platform here, and then there's a platform over there. So now the next step we're going to look into, we've looked over materials and lighting stuff. We're going to have a look at making some blueprint stuff. Some pretty simple-ish, arguably simple-ish blueprints. We're gonna have a look at making some moving platforms and some doors that can open. So what I'd like to have is a moving platform that sort of ping pongs between here and here. So I have an elevator to get across, and then I want a door here to block this off. That will only open when I'm within like a proximity of it, and then when I move out of that proximity, it'll close again. Um, so I'm going to just get straight into that. Probably start the moving platform, but to get over it initially, I'm just going to talk a bit about what blueprints look like. So I guess we can do this sort of on the fly while we're making the platform, and it might be easier to just sort of explain it as we go. We'll see how that works. To start off, the same way we made our material by right clicking and clicking material, what we're going to do instead is right click or click out of the top left and go into blueprint class up here. So if we click that, it opens up this little window which is asking for a parent class. This is where it starts to get a bit more codey and stuff. There's a whole bunch of these parent classes we could like pick from, which is basically these preset sort of code systems, modules, I guess you'd call, that we can use as like the base of what we want to make, and then we expand on it ourselves. So we can see a few at the top here. We have actor, pawn, character, play controller, game mode base, actor component, and scene component. The ones we tend, and the ones we're probably be messing around the most with, are just actors. An actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. Um, Things that might be an actor in a game would be uh, like a weapon that you could pick up, or a like TNT crate in like Crash Bandicoot that if you touch it or go near it, it'll explode. Um, or like a chest that you can open that contains another item, which would be another actor, like a healing mushroom or something from Mario. So we're going to make an actor, and this is going to be the base of our moving platform. So clicking actor, I'm going to name this BP for blueprint underscore moving platform. I'm going to call mine O2 because I have another one somewhere else already. And I'll let you do that real quick. I'm just going to open my here just so I can follow along with myself a bit easier. Sorry. Cool, and once we have this blueprint, we double click this to open this up. Again, similar how it came with material, we have a separate window. I'm just going to grab the tab and dock it up here so it's a little more readable for myself. So where to begin with blueprints? It's very word heavy and there's a lot of stuff all over the fucking place. Basically, I guess the things on the UI here to take note of is on the right we have the details panel, which again, as we click components on the left here, so components are similar to our outliner, but we actually use this a bit more over using the viewport in the center here. So if we click different things here, we can see we get different details, like different settings to change. Underneath that, we have more like componenty stuff, so we can see the event graph if we double click that, or if we come up to the top here, we can see these sub tabs. There's viewport, construction, script, and event graph. This is where, similar to like the material editor, where we had like sort of like spaghetti code, this again, it's like spaghetti code where we can click and drag things out and connect things up. But rather than putting things like values that give us like colors in our material, we're actually firing different events and functions and like gameplay things that could happen and affect the world or this actor in specific in this instance. Um, in our components, we can come up here so we can add new stuff. So like, let's might be a bit all over the place, but let's say for example for a moving platform, we want uh, something to stand on right now. So right now there's nothing to see. We have this default scenery, which is just nothing. It's just a little icon by default. So let's go add, and then at the top we have common. What we want to do is we want to add a cube, and this is just going to be basically our moving platform. Just name it whatever. It's, leave it as cube, and I'm going to hit compile on the top left, which compiles all the code and checks the errors and stuff. And I'm also going to hit save. So we just have an actor, a blueprint that just has a cube. If I come back to my level now, control space, I can see I have BP underscore moving platform. If I click and drag that out, it's just going to be this cube. But rather than being like a normal cube like the others, you can see it's marked as a blueprint. We can see the components of the blueprint, similar to what we were looking at here, also appear here above our details. And I'm just going to move this out here as if like it was my moving platform. And just sort of like get it where I need to. And what I want to do there is I'm going to be like, okay, this platform, the first thing I want to look at is this platform's very small. I have to be very specific about it. I want a bit of a wider one. So I'm also going to come into my blueprint again, grab my cube and then scale it out a bit wider. I might even make it a bit flatter because it's a very fat one. Or maybe this one I'm going to actually keep looking like this. And I'll just stuff that down there. Make it look sort of like that. That might be a bit too wide. So I'm just going to skinny that up a little. So I'm just going to keep checking and making sure it sort of works with the world. Cool, I'm pretty happy with this. Lower it there. So now if I stand on that, that feels good for a moving platform. It'll slide back and forwards then. I can stand on here. So the first thing we've added is this cube, which is just the base of our platform. We don't really need to do anything else. We can, if we come into the clear, we could add a color to it. If we've made a color, I could make it green or something. I've got something I've made before, like here's a red one. I'll just use that. Oh, actually, I've got a blue. We use blue. And that's a material I've made before, by the way. Over here we have now we want to make this do something. So right now this cube just sits here. I have this as an actual blueprint that's not fucking moving or anything. So there's a few little things first. We will have to eventually get into the event graph or construction script and add some code, but there's a few components we need to add first to our thing to make this run. Luckily for something like a moving platform, I've discovered that there's actually a almost like a thing that does most of it for you, which is really nice. So I guess there's a lot of moving platforms in video games that decided this would be convenient to add. So if you click this little add up on the top left of components, so you can look in the viewport or wherever, and we can start typing, and I want to search for an interp. So interp, interp to movement, and it moves the root component between a series of points over a given time. So that sounds like it could be useful. So if I click this and hit compile and save, I've now like, that's just added in as a bit of like codey chunk. If I look in the details, I know that it's added. We can see a few little settings here. Particularly, I'm going to be looking at the behavior. Right now, we have behavior type is one shot. Move to the destination and stop. And that's in the details of the interp. If I click that, you can see a few different say there's one shot reverse, move to the destination, return, and then stop. resets back to the start when reaching the end, or ping pong, repeatedly lerp from start to end and back. I'm gonna leave it ping pong because that's gonna make it like the game Pong, you know, like once it gets to the end, it's gonna go back to the start and then go back to the end. Um, and if I hit compile and save and hit play, nothing's gonna happen. And that's because we haven't actually defined which points it's going to ping pong between. So up above behavior, we have control, and we can see the duration, so how long it takes to move from the first point to the last point, which is 1 second. We'll get back to that because that's something we might have to test. But here we have control points, list of points to visit. So what we want to do is we want to actually add 2 points because I want a point at the start location and then at the end. So I'm going to come over here, hit the little plus twice, which will add 2 indexes, and I can pop those open a bit. And it's going to say position control point, and it'll just give me 3 numbers. So it'd be like, this is the vector of where we're starting. Everything has a vector. If I drag out a cube and I look in the details, you can see the location here, which is minus 1,457, 272, and 0, more or less. And as I move that around, that changes. So what this wants us is to define 2 points in the world to go between to A and B. So if I could compile, save, what might happen actually? Okay, good, it's relative. So it's not doing it anyway because I haven't set the second point. So if I set the second point, and this is going in X, Y, Z, you can mouse over to see that. So let's say in negative X or something, I want to move minus, well, let's just say Z. I'm going to move 1,000. I write 1,000 there. It's going to move 1,000 units to the Z and then go back to the start. So now we actually have a moving platform, and if I stand on it, it's doing what we want. It's happening a bit fast, so that's where you can change the speed. And essentially what we want to do is obviously not make it go direction. We want to make it head to where we want it to go. So I'm going to be like, okay, minus 400, because I can see that in the X, like if I go back to my world, on the bottom left of my viewport, I have a little like sort of gizmo telling me which direction I'm looking. If I look straight down at this, I can see that this way is positive X because the line's pointing that way. So if I want to go that way, I'm going to have to go negative X. And then I'm just sort of guessing how fast. I'm saying 400, let's say minus 600. And then I come back here and I hit play. It's not quite reaching, but it's now at least moving in the direction I want it to. Which is cool, and I could set it to like properly do that. It's happening really fast, so I'm going to make that minus 1,000 just to reach, and instead of 1 second duration, I make it 3. Hit play, and now it's slowly going. Cool, that more or less goes exactly to where I want it to. So it goes to the start, and there, and now I have a little elevator. This is cool, and this will work really basically, like there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a few little things we can do to make this a bit more dynamic. So say, oh, I've made this moving platform, but I also want one here, and I want it to move that way. So if I hit play, it's moving that way. I'm like, oh, I want it to move that way. I could rotate it. So now it is moving that way. But say I wanted it to move all the way over here, or even here, or I want to actually pick the point. And to go in here and write, you know, fucking numbers is really stupid. Because I don't, like, I had to guess that. It took me 3 good guesses to guess where it landed. It would be much more convenient if I could actually just say, like, in this screen, while I'm looking at this, be like, okay, I put a marker here. Now you go from here to here. If I could place those markers down. Also having something to be able to, just in this screen, be able to change the duration of A to B rather than coming in here and change the duration. So what we want to do in that sense is basically give us something called some variables that we can change in this thing by just clicking like in here, and we can change that per instance then. So I could have this one moving at a speed of 20 and this one at a speed of 2. They're both the same like original like blueprint, but because they're their own separate things, I can change individual stats about them, but they're still based off its parent. Uh, when I say parent, I mean like its owner. It's like uh, the thing can like where this is getting sourced from. So what we want to do, let's start with setting the duration, which is a pretty simple one. So we want to make it, and a good way to work about like blueprints and coder stuff is to verbally or like write it down somewhere. Say what you want to happen. So I want to make it so when I create and drag this blueprint in the world, I want to be able to define the time it takes to get to A to B, and then when I hit play, it'll just do that. So using that and taking that mumbled sentence into like a string of code, when I said I want to be able to drag it into the world and do this, well, if you want something to happen the second it's created, we use the construction script. The construction script does exactly what I just said. When I create this thing in the world, it'll run this script, and then like it'll do that once. It'll only do that when it's made, and then that's it. It'll never fire again. So that's it, because that's a value I want to change at the start. I would do that in here. Whereas the event graph is something that happens once you've hit play, or just in some events. So you could make it event begin play. So when I hit play, do this, and that's where I could be like after 20 seconds, explode or something, or every like time the player steps on it, like check for the player stepping on it and then do something. If these are ever closed by accident, you're like, where the fuck did that go? You can get back to the event graph by double clicking the graph here. And the construction script is in functions down here. And then that just reopens these tabs. Sorry, I thought I didn't. I thought, oh, where'd that go? So that's what we want to do. We want to be able to change, if I click this insert to movement, it doesn't matter which thing I'm in, I can see the details always. I want to be able to change this value of duration, but not in here. So I want this value here, but I'm going to have to somehow get this value and make it exposed to me here. So to do that, we're going to have a look into variables, which is just down on the bottom left in my blueprint. You can see the graphs we have, the functions, which are these guys here. We have macros, then we have variables. We can already see the 3 variables of our components in our scene. We can see our inserted unit, we can see our cube and our default scene root. Like, we could click and drag those into here and it'll say get or set. So let's say get cube, and this is just a pure reference to the cube we have here. But what we want to do is we want to make reference to our interpolation movement. So we're going to grab this component here and drag it out, and we want to get it. So we don't want to set anything about it. We just want to get the this component, because we're going to be getting specifically the duration of it. So what we want to do is dragging out from here. So these little pins, we want to grab from our insert to movement, and then we want to be writing duration, which is the exact same as it's written here. So if I drag out, right, duration, we have get duration, we also set duration, which is what we want to do. We want to set the duration. So if we hook that up to the construction script, these big white ones are sort of like the flow, like it'll do this one, do whatever this thing says, go through this big white one, do whatever this says, go again through the big white one, do that, and so on. Whereas all these colored ones underneath represent different things. So this blue one represents the component of this. This green one represents a float variable. Red is like a boolean, which is just like yes or no. So these are like sort of sub to the main like flow things. So what's happening right now is if I hit save and compile and I press play, none of these will probably move, or they're going to move extremely fucking fast. because it says 0 seconds in duration. So it's overriding. I could write anything here now, and it's not going to give a shit what I write. Because the first thing we're doing when we create this is we're setting the duration to 0. So this is like an override now. So now we can come in here and change, like I can write in here and I can write 40, and now if I write 40 and yeah, that's probably. Now it's going to take 40 seconds to go between A and B, which is really slow. Or what I want to do is actually in here, in my details panel here, I want to actually be able to see that number and change it here. So what we want to do is we actually want to make a variable out of this timer, which is just a single number here. So this is called a float. So in variables, if we hit plus, it's going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this well, I guess I'll call it duration, or like platform duration, or something so I know what it is when I'm changing the value. And by default, we created that value. It says Boolean over here. So a Boolean is an on and off, like a binary, like yes or no. If we click this, the word Boolean, we can see a whole bunch of different types of like mathy things in code, like integers, whole numbers, floats, any sort of number. A string is text, and a vector is 3 transformations. Free, just numbers that can make a transformation. Luckily, Unreal does a thing where it also just maps, it's color coded, so we can see the duration here. And if I mouse over it, says float. The duration is a float. So I want this platform duration to be a float. And now that says that, so hit compile or whatever. It won't let you actually change anything here to hit compile. I now have a little variable called platform duration. So if I look at this and I come back here and I click my thing, I don't see it. Where is it? Well, to make it visible in the viewport and in like your game levels, there's a little eyeball just to the right. It's sort of hard to see of these guys, but if you see just to the right of there, there's like a little eyeball. If you click that, this eye turns on. The other thing you can do is on the top right in the details, it's selected. It says instance editable, and it's a tick box, but just this eyeball makes it more convenient because it's right there. So now that eyeball visible, if I come back here and click this, right at the top, I can see it says default, and I see platform duration, and now I have a slider. Or I can write any number in there. But this number won't do anything. It's still set to really slow because in my construction script, it says 40 seconds. So what I want to do is I want this variable to control this. So I'll click the drag this platform duration. I want to get this. So I'm getting this value, which I'm setting in the level. And I'm going to click and drag that to duration. So now the duration is not something I'm hard coding anymore. It's being set by this variable. I'll hit save and that. And now in here, if I were to go platform duration 2 and hit play, it's now taking 2 seconds for that one to get to A and B. This one's still freaking out because by default, that variable is set to 0, but we can change that. So just by coming in here, we can see the default value is 0. It's just so it doesn't freak out like that. I'm just going to hit 1 and hit enter. So now the default value will be 1, which is still really quick, but at least it's not like... Cool. So now I'm dynamically changing the time of these as I create them. Now the next one that would be fun to change, rather than changing the time, we want to also change where the A and B points are. So right now, we hard-coded them in the actual component itself. Up here, we had control points, and then we created 2 and had 2 indexes. So what I want to do here, instead of having these like positions hard-coded in, I wanted to create 2 vectors, or 2 positions in the world that will be vectors, that are my A and B. So I'm basically replacing this guy and this guy with 2, very similarly to how we created this float, But rather than actually have a number here, which is still fine, I want to actually have a thing I can see in the world. So if I go create variable, because we want two variables for this, the first one I'm just going to call position A, and I'm going to create a new variable and call that position B. So for position A, rather than a float, I actually want this as a vector, because I want a vector is like three values next to each other, which RGB or XYZ. We're going to use this for an XYZ value, which will just give us a hard, like, position in the world. And I'm going to do that for both of these. So the position A and B are vectors. Hit compile and save a bit of that. So we want two tick boxes on this one, actually. We want to be able to see this in the thing. So we're going to click these little eyeballs, both of them again. And now if we come back here and click this, we just think, hello, we can see the position A and B. But also, I want to actually be able to see these vectors on my viewport. So 2 down, and this is only available for like the vector one. Under instance editable in the detail, we can see show 3D widget. So if I tick that on for both of these guys, and hit compile and save and come back, you can now see these little diamonds when I click them. And if I click that diamond with that selected, I can now grab position B and move position B wherever I want it. So let's say there. Position A I'm just going to leave because I'd rather position A be where I've set the actual object. But if I wanted to have position A somewhere else, then this would snap instantly to there. That's fine. So you can't see it when you don't have it selected. It's only when you have it selected. If I hit play, nothing's happening because I haven't actually told it to use those values for anything. I've just created those values right now. So now we have our position A and our position B through our vector variables here, which again are instance editable and show the 3D widget. In our construction script, more or less what we want to do is we want to get the position A, we want to get the position B, and we want to basically get our interp to movement. So we want to get this code, and we want to get these control points. So from here, I'm going to write control points with dragging out, and we can see get control points. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get control. I want to set control points. So I'm going to retype that and just go set control. So we want to set what these are. We don't want to get what I've written here already. We're going to make new ones. So I'm going to hook this up in my chain. So, construction script when it's created, set the duration, and now we're seeing the control points. So I'm just going to move this around so it's a bit more visible. Let's move it down here. So what we want to do is we want to hook up the position A and position B of this. So right now, the variable that we got for this was the float. So it was just a single value. But with these control points, because there's multiple vectors, we actually have an array. So we have multiple things, because this could be, one item in this array, or it could be like 50 things. We have 2. I know we have 2. But we could have 50 points that it goes between. Like, that's up to us. So what we want to do is we actually want to, I'm going to get back to this side. We want to go from our position A and position B, and we want to make these our interp control points. So I'm going to go make interp control point. So I'm just going to move this a little over here. Interp control point is what these are called. We have our interp to movement, and then in control we have control point. So it's our interp control point. Keep position is relative ticked on. Otherwise, it's going to go to world space and be all crazy. And what we want to do is we want to do this twice. So I'm going to Control C and Control V, copy and paste that. So we're getting position A as a control point and position B as a control point. And now I have 2 of these guys, which could plug in here. But this is, we want both of these to be counted. So we need an array for both of these guys. So I'm going to drag one out, and I'm going to write make array. Which now, you can also tell when it's an array if it has this square sort of box around it rather than these circular pins. So I can drag that square box to square box. Cool. So we're setting the control points, but we're only setting one. So we're only setting control point 0, which you can see in bracket here. There's index 0, but we need another one. So just in this make array, click add pin, and now we have 2. And I can hook this one up. So now we've got position A is changing, and position B are now control points, and these control points are getting added to an array, which is just like a group, more or less, of these things. And this group is now overriding what I already had as the control point values for there. So if I hit compile and save, and come back into my level, hit play, I can see that this one is now moving between the point A and point B that I've already set. This one's not moving at all because I haven't actually, if I click this, point B is exact same position as point A. So the problem here is they're right on top of each other by default, which makes it a bit hard to click. So what I'm going to do is back in my blueprint, position B, I'm just going to set the default value for position B to just be 100 in X. So now if I hit, now position B just is slightly offset. If I hit play, it'll do like a real quick movement between those two, but now it's just easier to select that guy, move this to wherever I want, like over here. I can even make it go up like there, and now if I hit play, you can see that working. Oops, that's very quick. So if I click this, platform duration, set that to about like 3 seconds instead of 1. And look at that. You got a cool little platform that I fell off and I'm being absorbed into now. I think the camera is just like freaking out. Oh, that's really cool. Anyway, that's basically our moving platforms. Quick overview of what we did again, just to recap. We created a cube in our actor blueprint that was going to be the base platform of what we made. Actually, changed my mind. I want to make these flat now. So we made our cube, which is like the base platform for our character to stand on. By default, it comes with collision stuff. We added an interp to movement under the components, which goes between a series of points over a given of time. We changed that to be a ping pong behavior type. We added 2 control points. We then defined what the duration of A to B, or the whole string is, as well as the control points by creating variables, 1 float and 2 vectors, to control the duration with the float. And the 2 vectors got we converted those into control point data that are native to this guy, made an array out of those, so one variable contained all of this data, which overrid the control points of the interp to movement, because we set that from here. Then in our viewport, we changed just the values ourselves. It's now really low because I made that squished. So that's like a brief sort of everything there. And now if I hit play, they'll all work how I want them. So rather than having this one come over here, I'm actually going to make that come to there. Cool. So now I have an elevator. Anyone in the chat having any issues with that or any questions about that? Just do it in the little voice channel chat. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to creating some doors that we can open with our character, which is the second blueprint thing I'm going to try. Cool. Doesn't look like anyone's really typing. Okay, again, I'll upload this whole video later, so anyone that's a bit confused about that can just re-look at that and pause it, go their own pace. Sorry, not that guy. Okay. So for doors, we're gonna basically start this the same way we created the other one. So we had a moving platform. I'm going to make a right click in my content browser, go add. I'm going to go blueprint class. We want an actor blueprint because we don't need any of these other bits, like it's not a character or anything. So we're just going to make an actor. And I'm going to call this BP for blueprint underscore door. And I already have one, so I'm going to call this O2, but you can just call it door. And we're going to open this up. And again, make that tabbed up here. And we're back in an empty blueprint. All right, so the first things we need to figure out what we need here is we're going to need the components of our door. Similar with the moving platform, how we knew we needed a base to stand on, as well as that insert to movement component. We need some things for our doors. So the first one is we need an actual door. If you had a door mesh, we go for that. I'm just going to use a cube again. My QB door. I'm going to give it, I made a material earlier. Just give it, I don't know here, solid blue. Cool. So I've got this material here. I'm going to make it more door-ishy by just doing this and there. That's my door. And I can come back into here, drag it out because it's got to fill that space. Realize my door is extremely tiny. Let's scale that actually a lot bigger. This is where you set rules in your game, like if you're actually making a real door, make the cube the size of an actual door. Or stuff like that. I'll actually just make these. Bump up to there. Okay, so we have our little blue cube door. What else are we going to need for this? Well, we need something to tell when the character is standing in front of it or like is in proximity to it. So what I want to do there is sort of make like a trigger volume, like something that detects the player. To do that, I'm going to go add, and if I scroll down a little bit, you can see these collisions down here. It's not a big scroll, it's under the basic shapes, and there's some cameras. There's this chaos stuff, which is the instructions in. But you see box collision, capsule collision, or sphere collision. You can also just write collision in. So I'm going to create a box collision. And I'm just going to leave it called this box, or maybe I'll call this trigger instead. And what's going to happen is it's going to give me this little box in the scene. But it's like a transparent, so you just see like the edges of the box. I'm going to scale this up a little just for visual sense. But what I want to happen, and verbally talking, I want it so if my player walks anywhere in this box, the door will open. And the second I walk out of the box, the door will close again. So coming into my scene, I can see like, yeah, I'm probably going to have to fill up a bit more. Or it's going to be really close. I'm going to make that a bit wider. More or less going to copy the same like dimensions of my door. Something like this. And maybe a bit longer as well. Like that. Cool. So what I want to happen is whenever I walk in that box, it's going to open the door. And when I walk out, it'll close the door. By default, these collisions are set to not override the character, so we can walk through them. Some, as opposed to like the door, which has like hard collision. Collision stuff is something you can see in the details panel underneath physics usually. You can see the collision preset set to overlap all dynamic. We actually want to change this to one that's a bit more suitable for what we are doing. So with the box selected, like our little trigger volume or our collision box, scroll down in the details under physics, or just write this yourself, and in collision presets where it says overlap all dynamic, which could work, but just for the sake of it, I'm just going to go down to the very bottom of this drop list, and there's one called trigger, which is very handy. Because it basically does what we want it to do, what we've already said. We want it to work as a trigger volume. You can see if you open up the collision presets what this is doing. You can see things that it'll ignore, things that it'll overlap, and things that it'll block. Block means we can't pass it, so for example, this door would be set to block in its collision. It's blocking everything right now because it's blocking the camera. It's blocking like, if I shot it with a bullet, it would stop that. Whereas this trigger volume is letting everything actually pass through, but still recognize that it's going through it. Whereas if it's set to ignore, it won't even like acknowledge it. Like it just completely pass through, but won't even like recognize that a player has walked through it. So overlap is something great for triggers. But it's just already set as a preset. So yeah, with triggers selected on, that's all the components we basically need for our scene. There's no variables or anything for this we could really like need at the moment. So what we want to do now actually is we want to go into the event graph, because this isn't something we don't want, unlike the moving platform, to define all these features at runtime, like before runtime, sorry. We want this to actually happen while we're playing, so at runtime. Sorry, I got my words mixed. So we do want this to happen while we're actually playing the game. And a good way to start this is these default things aren't super handy. What we want is when we walk past this trigger volume, and we are inside it, we want the door to open, and we're outside it, we want the door to close. So coming down here, if we click this trigger volume, we can actually see, and we scroll down the details, these little green plus areas. And we can see a bunch of event things we can call here that are relevant to this. So one of them, or two of them actually, is on component begin overlap and on component end overlap. So I'm going to click the plus for begin, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to click the plus for end. So we have two little scripties here now in event graph, on component begin and on end. We have a bunch of other things like information we can pull out, like which actor we hit, what we've like, just like all the information of what's actually passed through. If it's got an index applied to it, and did it hit a sweep as well. So the next step is, and it's just the useful thing for blueprints, is if we right click somewhere and write print, we'll get a print string, which is just, all this does, it's for debugging. If we hook this up to on component begin overlap, we could say hello. So by default it says hello. So I compile and save and press play. If I walk into that thing on the top left of my screen, it's sort of hard to see, but you can see it goes hello every time I step inside that volume. There is one problem with this, and that is right now it's letting any single thing that, like any single actor that like passes through will count as the door opening. So if I had like, like a bouncy ball blueprint, then the bouncy ball like walked past this door, the door would open for that ball. So we want to say, okay, don't open this door for anything except for the character, or except for like a list of these things that you could say. Like, so basically going to be like, we're making it exclusive, so only our character can walk through this door. It's not necessary for this, but it is just a clean way to go about this, and it's good to learn. So how do we say, oh, ignore everything except for our character? So first we have to find out what our character is. And earlier we've already knew that it was the third person blueprint when we clicked add feature content pack. So if we go third person blueprints, this BP underscore third person character is the character we are playing as, like we're spawning in and it was one of these. So that's the name of the blueprint, BP underscore third person character. So coming back to our blueprint here, we want to do a thing where the first thing that happens is we go cast to, and now it's giving us a list of all these other things we can cast to. We're going to cast to BP underscore third person character. I have two of each, which will be confusing because I've got two characters, so hopefully I'm clicking the right one. If not, I'll notice the other one. And we have to define what the object of this character is. So on overlap, we're looking for another actor, which is us. It doesn't know it's us yet, but we're looking for another actor. And if that actor is this blueprint, which is our player, then do this. Say hello. If it's not our player, we can set a whole string of things, like say it was like an enemy base, right? And the door would open for enemies, but if it saw you there, it's going to be like, uh-oh, we saw the other player, so it's failed or something. You aren't like the enemy character. So then we could be like, oh, play Siren and make like guns come out and start shooting you or something. So that's like a branch in like if it's true or if it's false. We also want to do this for end overlap, so when we leave. So I'm just going to copy the same thing in other actor and go to object. We can get rid of the print string hello because that's going to work. So actually maybe I do need that for mine. So hit compile, save, hit play. If I walk in here, and I've cast the wrong character. I don't know which. Why did I add another one? That was very silly of me. Okay, there we go. Got it. This isn't an issue you guys will have. This is just an Eric thing. Cool, so that's working. So how do we make the door open? So we're getting a hit when we walk through that volume here. Now we got to make it so it affects the door open. So what we want to do is we want to actually set the relative location. So we're going to go. I'm going to drag out of here. I'm going to go set relative location. And now it's saying, what do you want to set the location of? We want to set the location of cube, so we can find set relative location cube. Or we could just get the normal thing itself. And then where it's like target, we can drag out the cube. And now we've got our reference cube. So click that in there. And if we hit save and compile, it's looking for a new location, which is currently 0, 0, 0. So the door is here. It looks all great. Second, we walk into this space, nothing will happen. It's really fucking cool because it's relative. Sorry, it's not going to world space. But if I set this to be like, I don't know, 500 in X, it's going to move 500 units, probably that way. So I'll step on it. Oh, it's gone. Oh, sorry, it moved in. So the door opened. It got pushed in. But I'm not doing anything to say when I leave, close the door. So now the door's open. It's shoved in the wall. But it's staying open like that. And it should be closed at this moment. So what we could do is copy the exact same thing over. So I'm going to copy all that and paste. And this is on the end overlap. The new location I'm going to set to 0. And now if I hit play, when I walk in, it moves 500 that way. When I walk out, it goes back. So I go open, close. So I can walk through. When I'm in, it closes. So that is actually like working at a very like basic level. But there's a few little extra things I want to do to make this a little smoother. One, I don't like the fact that it's just fucking instantly opening and closing. It's not very doorish to be like that, unless it was like a sci-fi like grid door. So we're gonna have a look at what we can do to make that transition a bit less harsh. So I'm actually just gonna drag this shit a little to the right. And there's a really handy thing you can do in event graphs in blueprints called a timeline. So if I right click and write timeline, at the very bottom there's a little clock and it says add a timeline. And now it's asking for a name this timeline. I'm going to call this open door. And here I've got a whole bunch of nodes. I got play from start, stop, reverse from end, set new time, update, finished, all these different things. I'm going to hold Alt and then left click to break these connections. Sorry, I should have mentioned it earlier. You can also hold Control to not break, but actually re-pick where you want it to go. But Alt is just to break them. So what I want to happen now is when I overlap with my character, I want to play this timeline. Alternatively, when I finish overlapping, I want to reverse this timeline. I don't actually need one of these now because I only need, they're both coming out to the same thing. So I want to, as the timeline runs, I want to update this position. But there's a problem with this. This timeline doesn't actually fucking do anything. We haven't told it what to do. So if we double click that, we're going to get a new little window. And it'll be all black, and it's just like we need to set a timeline, which is more or less just we're setting a curve over a length of time. So I'm going to hit plus on the track. I'm going to add a float track. We could use a vector track for this, but I'm preferring to do this with a float just for simplicity. It's like, oh, name this. I'm just going to call this opening. So with this opening track, the length is set to 5 seconds. This is how long you want your door to open, basically. I'm going to say 1 second. So that's shorten this big gray area, like the light gray. So it's going to take 1 second for this timeline to play. But we need to set some values. So in this sort of graph, which I'm holding right click to move around, if I right click just once, not right click and hold, it's going to be like add key to curve float 0. Sorry, I need a bit of water. So I'm going to click that, and now we have a little dot on my little timeline. It's asking for a time and a value. Rather than moving this, I'm actually going to say time 0. So this is going to be the value, and the value is 0. So it's 0 seconds, the value is 0. And now I want, what did I have here? 500, that was pretty good. I want to right click again, add a key, and I'm going to say at 1 second, the value is going to be, fuck, I don't know. Let's do 1 or 150. Sorry, 500. That's what I wrote before that. I think it worked. It's very long now, so if you hit F in this, it's going to normalize it to give you a normalized value across your screen. Otherwise, it's going to have like that, and you're like, what the hell am I looking at? But hitting F just cleans that up for you. So hit compile and save. So what I have here right now is a little timeline that's when you play this, it's going to go from 0 to 1, it takes 1 second, and it's going to slide this value here from 0 to 500 in like a linear curve. You can actually change how these curves work if you right click the little dot. So if you said auto, this little bar represents, if you mouse over you can see what the value is. So doing this means it's going to be slow to start, do the thing, and then be slow to end. I'm going to leave it as this so it's a completely clean movement of like open and close. It'll take exactly 1 second of no dips. And in my event graph now, I have a new little option that appeared out my timeline called opening. And what I want to do is actually use this value to control this location. There's two little ways we can do this. We can't just drag this to this. I mean, we could, and it's going to do a conversion. But the problem with that is it's going to turn every single XYZ into whatever this one value is. So if this was 500, it's going to make the X, Y, and Z 500, which would make our door fly up somewhere in the sky. We only want it to move on X. So how do we do that? There's two ways. One, we can drag out of this float and write make vector. So with that, we get a new little node here of an XYZ. And we want to, right now it's plugged into X, which is actually what we want. But we can say, okay, this value is going to control the X, but Y and Z are going to stay 0. And then if we drag this into the new location, that's basically going to work. The other way we can do this, I'm going to go with this way, but the other way you can do this is actually in this node here, if we right click this vector, there's a button here that says split struct pin, which actually breaks this into 3 separate floats, because that's all a vector is, it's just 3 floats. And now we can get the XYZ, we can just plug that straight into there, which is a few less nodes, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to leave it like this so you can sort of see what the fuck is happening. I'm going to hit compile and save, and with that, what should actually happen is if I hit play, when I walk in here, now my door, rather than snapping instantly from 0 to 500, it's now taking 1 second to do that graph we saw, that little line graph. to go between 0 and 500, but rather than snapping, it's going through every value, so 0, and then counting up to 500 in 1 second, which gives us a nice smooth opening. And that's basically it for doors. Like, that gives us a door. There's a few extra little settings we could play here. Something that I like to do, which is a little more advanced, is rather than having this value go from 0 to 500, I'm going to make this go from 0 to 1. And hit F again, just so it frames up properly. So now my value is going from 0 to 1. And the benefit of that is my door's barely going to fucking move now when I hit play. If I walk in there, it's just going to... You can't even see it. It's just like cracking open. You can see it like right on the left there. But what I can do is... I have this value of 1. And if I drag this over here a little... I could now multiply this value. So if I write multiply, or if you're a mathy, if you hold Shift 8 and write asterisk, that's a multiply. So now if I multiply this value and plug this into here instead, and if we multiply 1 by 0 by default, so you need to say multiply it by 500. So 1 times 500 equals 500, so what we had before. It's going to do exactly what we had before we changed it. But the reason I did this now is I have a value here that I can set. So if I made it similar to what we did with the moving platform, where we set the duration of how long a platform takes to move, I'm going to make a variable here and call it door open time. And I'm going to change it from a boolean to a float. And I'm going to drag this out and say get door open time. Another way is if you hold control when you let go, it'll automatically be a get. If you hold alt, it'll be a set. So I'm going to get door open time and plug that in. So now I'm multiplying this timeline by whatever this value is. I'm going to set a default value of 1 because 0 is not going to do anything. Well, I'm going to set a default value of 500 actually, because that's what I want to be that default. But I'm also going to make sure to click this little eyeball down here. Oh, sorry, it's not door open time. This is door open amount. Oops, my bad. So if I hit play now and walk in, it's going to open fine. But if I click this door and go in the details, I can see a little thing on the right here. Door open amount, 500. If I made this 140 and hit play and walk in there, it's only going to move this little bit open rather than the whole door. So this could be useful if you had, like, you know, sliding door on different sort of environmental areas, like big doors, small doors, and you didn't want it to like completely open. It's just nice to have that flexibility. And I guess that's pretty handy. To change the time of this timeline, say we wanted it to not be 1 second to open, but take 5 seconds or 0.1 of a second. There's a few little things we could do there. It gets a little more techy. I won't go into too now, but you can actually retime these timelines. There's heaps of documentation around. I could show you a bit after all of this tutorial stuff, how to do that. But I'm just going to leave this at there for now. And then that's that. We have moving platforms and we have a door that can open, which are the fundamentals of our level design. Hi, I'm back. Okay, so we have our moving platforms and our doors that open. So from here, we need to actually make something for our little game that we can win. Something so we can win. Like, so I'm going to make some collectibles that we pick up, and when we collect every single one of those, we want some text to appear on the screen that says, "Hooray, you won!" Or we could, you know, upload our own image or whatever you want, with an option to then restart the level. Something I will throw in now is right now when I hit play, I'm just falling down from wherever my camera is. If I want to set a position where I will always start from, if you come up here to the little green plusies cube and go basic, it's like, so the first thing in this little list, basic, we have player start, and if you click and drag that out, you'll get this little doodad, and it'll face whichever way it's the little arrow's pointing. So I'm going to click that, move it there. So now if I'm all the way back in, I hit play. It's going to pop me in right here where that player's start was. Cool, just a little handy thing. If for testing you don't actually want to start from there, where you have play, there's these three little dots, and you can actually change spawn player at the default player start or the current camera location. So you can put it back to playing from there, but if you want to actually start from where you've placed your marker, that's the spot to do it. Cool. So let's get into hang on. Let's get into making some collectibles to pick up. So what we're going to do is similar to how we made the door and the platform and that, we want a new blueprint. And this is also an actor, and it's called BP underscore collectible coin. I'm going to make a coin. You can call this whatever you want. And let's open this up. Make that full screeny. So again, we're going to need something. So the first thing I'm going to add is a visual representation of what I'm going to make. So I want a coin, so I'm going to make a cylinder here. I'm going to put on its side and squish it in like that. And that's my coin. And I can just test the size of that by dragging that actually out here and realizing, oh, that's actually quite big. So I'm going to make that a little smaller. Well, yeah, that looks fine. So that's my coin. Sorry, one moment. I just want to make sure doing it the same way I did before. I don't deviate too much. Right, I thought so. Okay, so with our coin, the first thing what else we want to add? We need all our components in here. So we have our visual representation. Similar to how we had a trigger volume for our door, we also want sort of like a thing that's like when we step into this volume, that counts as picking up the coin. So we're going to add a collision, but this time I'm going to add a sphere collision. And I'm going to actually scale that a little bit up, like that. So now it's like, rather than checking if we've actually touched this coin itself, it's just checking as long as we've touched anywhere within this sphere, that counts as picking up the coin. This could be like, if you wanted a big pickup range, you could be like that. So like, I could touch it here, and then the coin might just like, absorb to me or something. It'll just disappear in this scenario, but I'm just going to make it sort of fit its size, more or less, like this. And that's all I need for that to work. I got to change some settings here now. Again, I got to make my sphere collision. So if I click my sphere in the details and I scroll down to collision, I want this to be a trigger because I want to check for when I'm overlapping with it. And also with my cylinder, right now, if I were to hit play, I can actually like run into my cylinder, and I don't want that. I actually want to be able to pass through it. It's unlikely I would even pass through it because I'll pick it up before like that even happens. But just, sometimes things happen, and I might, if I was going like in a really fast car and I ran into this to pick it up, I might accidentally like blow up because I technically hit a wall. So I'm going to grab my cylinder or whatever shape I'm used, and in collision presets, I'm actually going to write no collision. So every single thing is set to, oh, it didn't really do everything, did it? Is that glitch sheet? If I run through this now, I should, no, that's fine, cool. So now it's not colliding at all, so I can just walk straight through this thing, as if it's like an ethereal item. So those are the two components I need, and that's all set up. So the first thing we got to do, and this one's actually really simple, and thinking about it now, maybe I should have started on it. If you grab your sphere collision radius, you want to make it so when we touch this thing, it disappears. Like it just vanishes. So similar to like the door, on component begin overlap of the sphere itself. So our sphere like trigger, call this trigger. So on component begin overlap, we want to check for our character because we want to make sure it's us touching it. So again, I'm gonna cast the third person. Cast to third person character. Cool. So and we're checking for, it's another actor. So now it's like, cool, it knows we passed it. What do we want to do? Well, we want to just destroy it. So destroy actor. So this just deletes it from the world. This is super like simple, and all that this means now, like I can hit play, this will work. If I just walk into this coin, it's just going to disappear. Or it's actually not going to disappear. That's really fucking cool, isn't it? Oh, because I'm using the wrong third person. Oh, which is the right one? Is it this one? Man, I really kicked myself in the foot by doing that. Adding it twice. Okay, it was not that one. I just made it twice. Pass to third person. Please be the second one? It can only be one of these. It's two. Am I losing it? Is it even in there? Have I said this to even work? I don't think I know how to do this. I'm losing my head, losing my mind. Just gonna let him do that. Also, I'm getting really sick of that, so I'm gonna go back to current camera position. Okay, I must be casting to the wrong third-person character. This should work for you because you'd probably only have a singular one. But if you're stupid like me, and had two of them, then that's just gonna be really annoying. In hindsight, actually, I could just rename this to Poop Fart and name this game mode Poop Fart. Ignore this. This is professionalism, but now class 2 third person character. There's only one. Excellent. And I just got to make sure the game mode I'm running isn't Poop Fart, which it was. Debugging. Look at that. Okay. Sorry about that. All you have to do is cast a third person character. You won't have this problem of multiple in there because you didn't have multiple like I did. So all I'm doing right now is I'm destroying the actor. That's just a thing that I'm doing because I'm gonna run the code of like, have we collected them all somewhere else? If you were actually making a collectathon, you probably wouldn't want to destroy the actor straight away. You'd want to actually be counting you collecting this. I'm doing this a real dirty way, but it is a way that works, and if it works, it works. Don't know what I said, please. So this is basically it for our collectible. There's a few little things I kind of want to add to this, which are all visual right now. I have a static white fucking Panadol tablet. Instead, what I want to do is, firstly, I want it to not be white. So let's... I wouldn't happen to have it yellow or gold. Probably not. Okay, let's find a pretty color. This one. I have a glowing red that I made earlier. And I also want this to spin around, which would be fun. So there's actually a really cool component where you can write rotating movement. And what that does is, if I hit play, whoops, not that way. It makes my thing spin, which feels a bit more video gamey. You can control that if you click the rotating movement. Its rotation rate is 180 on the Z axis. I could make that, really fast, or I can make it spin in all directions if I flip that around a little. I'm just gonna make it like 100. Hit save. Cool. So now it's kind of slowish, but still like rotating when I pick up this piz. The last thing I want to do is maybe add a light to this. So I'm going to also go add and add a, I'm just going to write light. I'm going to add a point light and make it like red or something that feels cool. Make the intensity a bit up. Actually, it already is up. I guess the attenuation a bit down. So now I hit play, it should, I guess it's kind of hard to see in direct sunlight, but it is casting a light. And I can pick that up. And I could add a few of these around. So I'm going to add one here and also add one in this room. And maybe just one in the middle there. So you gotta take the little elevator. So these are my little pickups. And right now if I run through and I collect them all, think the door will not open, probably because I bet the door is looking for poop fart. Wow, look at me go. Cast to third person character. Sorry, I'll just quickly replace that. Reverse. Okay, as I was saying, if I collect them all now, they'll all just disappear, but nothing will happen. We don't have any win condition. We don't have something that says, oh, look, that we've collected them all, the game is done. So we have to set that logic up somewhere. Usually, this is something that would traditionally be done inside the game mode, like in a game mode blueprint, similar to this third person one. And you could like then set a whole bunch of rules, and you can have multiple game modes, like capture the flag, or whatever, just like as little things you can pop in your scene. But for this tutorial, I'm going to keep it really simple and really a little dirty. What I'm going to actually do instead is make a thing in the level blueprint, which is a blueprint that's basically associated to this world we're currently in. And it's going to actually check the level for all of these little pickups. And when it finds that there's none of them left, that's when it decides we've won the game. So that's what we're going to do. To open the level blueprint, I'm just going to close these other guys, is right next to this little plus square, cube with the green plus, is this little sort of node thing. And it's just a list of all world's blueprints available to the user. So we can even find, if we have a blueprint, we can even find the doors and stuff we've made before, probably the third person as well. But we can also see in the middle of this list, this open level blueprint. Again, that's just up here next to the cube with the plus. Open level blueprint. And we've just got a blank blueprint now. It's not for anything. There's no like components or anything we can add in this because it's tied to this level. It's almost like the code associated that this will run when this world loads. And what we want to be doing here is we want to every tick, so event ticks are kind of something we shouldn't be using too much, but we're going to be being a little sneaky. So every tick we're going to drag out from there. Or if these aren't here, we can right click and go event tick. And we get one as well. Basically, we want to get every single one of these guys, our collectible coins. So we're going to get component. Get all actors of class. So we're getting all the actors of a class and which class we want. So which component do we want, which blueprint do we want? We can open this drop-down list and we can even straight up just look for or type in BP underscore collectible coin. So it's going to get them all and it gives us an array as an output because there's more than one. So it's going to give us every single one of these. So rather than actually having this array of every single one of all the information applied to it, I just want a number. I just want to know how many there are. So out of this array, I'm going to drag out, so not the actual thing itself, but out of this blue square array, I'm going to drag out, and I'm going to write length. And what this is doing is it's converting all of these and getting the length of them, so how many there are, and it's giving me an integer, which is a whole number, as the return value. Keep in mind that integers count 0 as we would count 1. So if there were 3 coins in our level, it's going to say it's going to go 0, 1, 2. So just keep that in mind when you're handling with like a lot of this kind of stuff. Math people are weird. Anyway, we have the length of our thing, so we can make a print. Remember we used that earlier for debugging. And we can print something, and right now it's going to say hello, but instead of hello, we can actually drag this output into hello. So instead of hello, it's actually just going to return a number. Of every time. So on the top left, the whole left of our screen, because it's happening every tick. So every, more or less, every like frame that's happening in our game, it's returning a value of how many collectibles we have in our level, which is 4. So it looks like it actually is ignoring 0. Wow, that's a way to do that. But the second I pick one up, it now says 3, 2, 1, and if I get this one, 0. So it actually returned a normalized version of the length, which is that's like normal to artists. Okay, cool. Glad it did that. So what we want to do is, we know that it's getting, no matter how many we drag in, this will always return how many we have. We want it so the second this hits 0, and I just deleted that print because we know it's working. The second this hits 0, we want it to do something. So how do we do that? Well, a good way is using a thing called an if statement or a branch. So if I write if, or if I write branch, I like to write if because it's 2 letters and you use these a lot, and it gives you the same thing. But we can make a branch, and from this branch, it's a true or false statement. So if it's yes, do this. If it's false, do this. So how do we get this integer to return? Basically, we want to say when this integer is 0, yes. We want yes to happen. So what we can do is, out of this integer, we can actually write equals. So we write equals, we can say it's equal to. And it says returns true if A is equal to B. So A is however many of these actors we have in our scene. B is 0. I'm going to leave that as 0 because when it gets to 0, we get an output of a boolean, which is a true or false, which now associates this true or false. So by default, every tick this is running, it's saying false. It's false. It's not happening. False, 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 false. But the second it hits 0, it's going to be true. So it's like a gate now we've created. And from this gate, we need to actually set up a win screen. So, sorry, I keep hitting save. This might be worth to say how to save your level. Hitting Control S or pressing this little save icon on the top left of the viewport just above it, like the floppy disk. It'll be like, you have to save your level as. This is, if your thing crashes, you'll be very upset. So I'm going to call this L for level, Unreal Map Wow. Now if I hit Control Space, I can actually see in my content browser this orange thing with like this little hill and stuff, and it's level. If I double click this, it's actually going to reload this level, which I was already in, so that wasn't a very impressive transition. Cool. So back to the level blueprint, which closed when I reloaded the map. That's awesome. Just going to keep this open. But now we need a thing to like tell us that we've won. So what I'm going to do is actually make a win screen. And this is our first bit of UI stuff. So in our content browser, if I right click, at the very bottom, we have user interface. And I'm going to make a widget blueprint. These are pretty handy. These are like basically like your HUD and stuff that you can make, like, you know, menus in here, or your character has like, you know, reload bars or whatever the fuck. That's all done in here. So I'm gonna click that, and since it's gonna ask for a parent but I'm just going to click use a widget. So the first one, and I'm going to go, it's a widget blueprint. So I'm going to go WB for widget blueprint underscore game over or win screen or whatever the fuck you want. And then I'm going to open this up. And I have a big grid of nothing. So this is where UI gets made. You'll notice that a lot of Unreal starts as big grids of nothing. So what we want, and this is a little bit finicky, so I'm just going to go over this real broad because I'm not actually too familiar with this stuff myself. Every time I come in here, I feel like it's a bit of like, I got to refresh myself. But I'm going to make a thing called the canvas panel on the left here. So in our little palette, it's even called a palette here. I feel like it should be called palette everywhere. But we want to, in our palette, grab a canvas panel, which is under panels. And we're just going to drag that down into our hierarchy. And what that's done is in our viewport here, I'm pretty sure you could just drag it out here, but just it's in our viewport, we now have basically this box here is representative of our screen. And if I click into this canvas panel, you can see all like the details about it. We can give it a name and whatever. But the canvas panel is just the base for us to place things on. So in our canvas panel, we actually want some text that just says we won. So at the very top of our little palette, in these little buttons, we have text. So I'm going to click and drag text, drag that under my canvas panel. Now, in the top left, I've got some text. And you can move this around, but I'm not going to do that yet. Because the way this works isn't quite where you expect. This little star pattern you see here is where it's trying to anchor the text. So right now, if I were to play on, like, you know, this is a 16:9 resolution, which is most computers and stuff like aspect resolution. But say I played this on an iPhone, right? Which, you know, is more like fucking vertical screen. If I drag this down here like that and then play an iPhone, it's gonna be, the text is gonna actually appear somewhere else where I didn't actually want it to be. So that's what these anchor points do. They actually let us define where stuff in our UI will appear based off the screen we're on. So if I come in with this text selected, on the top right in our details we have anchors. And you can see by default it's on the top left. We can have it in the top middle, the whole top bar of the screen, the whole screen itself. I want this little one that's just like a little dot in the middle of the screen. And that's going to place the anchor in the middle of the screen. So that means no matter where no matter what the screen dimensions are, it's always going to try and normalize the position of this text based off the center of the screen, rather than the top left where it would try and like jank itself up there somewhere. This is the point now where you could drag it down here, but instead of that, I'm actually going to come over to the right here and change all these positions to just be 0. And that should actually place this in the dead center of my screen. It's like this to the right because in my appearance, and this is just general text stuff, we can see the alignment. I'm going to align it to center. And instead of text block, which you change somewhere, right here, content text, I'm going to write, wow, you won. Congrats. And I can change, you know, oops, let me do that. I can change the scale of that and all that shit. So let's leave it like this. Also going to create another text box underneath this. I'm going to go back to my palette, grab text under canvas panel, do the same thing and anchor it to the middle of my screen. Well, actually, I'm going to anchor this to the bottom center of my screen. I'm going to set these back to 0. But maybe in this position Y, I'm just going to make it go up. Whoop, shit, that's really jittery. I'm just going to put it like there. And I'm just going to change this to, instead of text, I'm going to write press R to reset. So that's how we can, just some visual things to know that we can reset our game. Cool. I'm also going to make that U1 a little bit higher. Position Y. Just go up like there, some. Yeah, cool. And there's other stuff you can do. You can add an image if you want, like it's the whole back panel, like you drew something. Like there's heaps of like way better tutorials than me just muttering about this online on how to make these things. Cool. So I'm just gonna leave this as this is. Close my little widget, and you can even see like in my content browser, you can sort of see the text in there. So what I want to do is now that we're back to here, I'm going to go back to the map into my level blueprint where we're doing our little checks to see when we've, finished. So what I want now is when we have finished, I want to put this UI that I made over the screen. So I'm going to go from true, I'm going to create widget. And it's going to be like, we're going to make a widget here. Which one? In my drop down, there aren't too many. There's the vehicle one though. WB, so which one? So game over. That's the one I just made. This is going to create it in the world, but it doesn't know where to put it yet. And then I just got to go from here and go add to viewport. And what I want to add is the thing. So just make sure you drag from the widget because that's what you're adding. And you compile. And now I hit play. And I grab all these dudes. And I get the last one. UL, you won. Congrats. Press R to reset. Doesn't do anything. Because we fucked it. Well, we never added the code to reset. But that works. So what I want to do from here now, just so you know, because this is a tick, this is going to constantly adding this over each other. You won't notice it too much there, but I think you can write like do once to properly actually like stop it from ticking. Maybe. Anyway, we'll test it. So what I want to do now is I want a new little bit of script to do what we just fucking said. We want to press R to reset. So I want to get when I press R on the keyboard. So I'm going to write keyboard. And now it's looking for all these events. And now there's all these buttons here. I'm just going to write R. Although it didn't really fucking make that less harder to find. So I'm going to have to scroll down. Find R on the keyboard. I definitely missed it. Why can't it just be in alphabetical order? That would be cool. Actually, I think if I just click any on the right here, I can actually change which key. So I'm gonna like, oh, you can click that and press R. That's cool. You press this button and R. You can just find keyboard R this way, but I mean, you can actually set any button you fucking want to do it, really. Q, R, there's R. It is alphabetical. So you want to press R, you want to reset the level. So a good way to do that is just to reload the level. So from out of pressed, you go load level. Is it level instance? Level. Oh, sorry, open level. Not load. Open level by name. So this is going to open a level. It's going to search for one in the thing, and it's going to be whatever this is. We can't drop down list this one, unfortunately. So we have to actually check what the name of our level is, and we did save it just before, which is L__ Unreal Map Wow. Whatever you've called it, you got to call it this exact same thing. So level to load L__ Unreal Map Wow. And that's it. If I hit compile and save, hit play, I'll pick up this one little dude here. And if I press R, I'm back at the start, and it's respawned. And if I finish the level, grab everything, wow, you won, press R, I'm back at the start. I never won. There's no winning. And on that note, I think that more or less covers it. From here on out, you could experiment with making a more complex map than this. I've made one earlier that looked like this guy, where you could run around and you had to collect these little pizza cones, and I made like some jumping puzzles. I even used the platform going on ridiculous speed over here. If you stand on it, it didn't fling you, but if you press spacebar, it actually flings you up like the jump button. And I put some stuff up there, so have a little fun. Uh, just like making stuff. Make a cool level. This is like the prerequisite to like making a whole level and stuff. But more or less, that's uh, the gist of like this course. So I guess that ends it. One little thing I can mention, if anyone cares, is I did like go into a little bit prepared on how to import custom meshes. So I have like my own little mask I made here in Maya and stuff that I lock to the character's head. To import stuff, I'll quickly just talk about that. To import stuff into Unreal in the content browser, it's the same way we make these materials at the very top. When we right click, we go import, and then it's going to be like, oh, what do you want to import? And this is where you can import your own textures or models that you have made. And once you do that, like say I've got my little thing here, I've brought my mask in already that I made in Maya. I've made a material, and this material, rather than having like those colors we made earlier, I'm actually using a texture sample. So if you right click, go texture sample, or like that one, or you can actually just drag in the texture, and then you just hook those up the right way you've made them. So like base color and whatnot. And then you just apply that material to the mesh. So if you double click this, you get a mesh editor, which is just specifically for this one I've imported. And just the first thing in the list is which material do you want to have it. For making it follow the character's head, like I did, that was me actually going into the characters. Here we go. So into their blueprint they've actually got for the character, and it's good to like have a look at what they did just to sort of learn what they've made. In here I actually just grabbed my mask, and because in the hierarchy I parented it under the mesh, and the mesh is like this character. Over here there was a parent socket which looks at like the rig of this character, like his skeleton, and I parented it to the head, so this mesh is like getting all the transforms of the character's head there, and that's how it's following. It's just like a quick way to do helmets and stuff. It's fun, or if you've got your own little mesh, it's fun to sort of screw around and add stuff. I've also made it set to visibility off. I've got it so if I press Q it turns on and off, but you can see it's doing that. It's just a fun little thing you can do. I've got it off because I've actually got a little scripty up here where I press Q to toggle the visibility of that mask, which, I just dragged mask out and wrote visibility, and one was like toggle. I was like, oh, that sounds like the way I want to go. So when I press play, I can press Q and turn that on and off. Cool. Okay, I guess with that, I'm going to end this because I've been blabbing on for hours now, and I've got to compile this video. So, yeah, any questions, feel free to DM me. Yeah, cool, thanks.